Hello YouTube. I just like to do a quick little video on the Raspberry Pi, or the Raspberry Pi 2 in this case. I just started getting into Raspberry Pi, started using them. I've made two systems. I've made one system that I play ROMs on, and the other system I have is a dedicated Kodi box, much to my wife's delight. So, to begin with, the Raspberry Pi is a motherboard it's an all-in-one motherboard. It's got a GPU in it, it's got RAM, it's got CPU, of course. It has a HDMI output, at least the 2.0 has HDMI. The first Raspberry Pi had a standard yellow RCA. It can take SD cards. That's the standard ideal boot mechanism. And they got a hardwire, Ethernet, and 4 USB ports. Also, the power supply that it takes is a mini USB, and it takes your standard 3.5 headset in. This is a more expensive, kind of the rich kid's version. This is what you do if you got a lot of money going into it. Yeah, a lot of money. Anyways, that's another awesome part about the Apple Pi. These motherboards made in the UK. Only costs about 35 bucks US, I believe. Oh, I'm up in Canada, and I got mine. This whole unit cost me about 80 bucks, I believe, after all the taxes and everything. And this one, with the power supply and the case, cost me 45, but I believe that there is a mistake on Amazon.ca. As soon as I bought that, I got it in, and I wanted to buy another one, and the price went up to 170 something for the same deal, so don't know what happened there, but they hooked me, and now I'm really into this stuff. Anyways, so, almost like doing a little unboxing, not quite though, because of course I already opened this before. And yeah, that's all it is. It's a motherboard, actually. It comes in a static-free bag, like all hardware should. My wife threw that out after asking me if it was okay, of course. Of course, wouldn't you know it, I said, yeah, you can toss it, and now I need it for this video, but you get the idea. Anyways, it comes bare bones. These heat sinks I put on myself. And this micro SD card, of course, I bought myself. Those don't come with the unit. The unit is an all-in-one, just one piece there, blam, that's it, that's what you got. And for the people who have a lot of these, for the people that use Raspberry Pi quite a bit, they kind of scoff at people that get the heat sinks. I hear a lot of people say a puffy band-aid, or sorry, a puffy sticker will do the same amount of heat dissipation that these units will. But I got that from the Amazon, from the lot, for 45 bucks. And I gotta say, I was really impressed. So it should be noted that this is the Raspberry Pi 2. I can't find the Raspberry Pi 1 online anymore. I'm not sure what kind of power the Raspberry 1 was packing, but by this point I think it's good to leave those behind. The Raspberry 2 is out. I know that it has a quad-core 900 megahertz chip, and the Raspberry Pi 3 just came out, and it has a 1200 gigahertz chip in it, and I believe a slightly more powerful GPU also. So yeah, you might just want to consider getting a Raspberry Pi 3. I understand that the Raspberry Pi 3 motherboards will also fit in the Raspberry Pi 2 cases. This is where you put your pins to do all your awesome stuff. You want to put a power button on here, you want to put a fan on here. These are your pins. They're kind of like the same idea as the pins in the old school computer cases when you wanted to plug in your reset button or your power button or this, that, or the other thing. USB, it's all right here. If you want to plug something in with pins, you're going to plug it in here. This is where you're going to plug in your display. A lot of times you can rip displays off of older hardware, and you'll find it has a plug-in quite a bit like this. Anyways, if you won't need a camera for whatever your project is, you can plug that in right here. There's multiple projects you can use that'll use a camera. Now, what I can tell you about the motherboard itself is that this is, I believe this is a CPU. This is the RAM. I've yet to find out what this is, but this sucker came with 2 heat sinks, and that's where I put them. The one I got in Toronto had 3 heat sinks, so I put them all over, although I don't think the Ram even needs one. Don't even know why they gave me a 3rd one there. Sounds like my puppy dog's at the door, wants in. Hello, Odie. Anywho, you don't even need a case for this. In fact, if you go to the raspberrypi.org, it will give you a printout that you can make. On this printout, you can trace it onto a piece of cardboard and fold that cardboard up, and bingo bango, just like that, you will have a cardboard case for it. But you know, you never know. Sometimes you just need a case on stuff. You don't want things landing on it. This isn't exactly a really delicate kind of thing, but you don't want to break any pins or anything, dropping anything on it. So I got it with the case. So here is the case. Yeah, pretty sturdy unit. Anyways, multiple uses that you can use one of these Raspberry Pis for. Now this one, I kind of call this the spoiled rich kids version. I got a fan on there. I got 3 heat sinks. This fan opens right up, so you can add more things. Yeah, 2 heat sinks. I got a heat sink at the bottom too, right down there. I was hoping that by having these heat sinks in this fan, I could overclock the system much nicer. But you're limited to how you are going to overclock your system based on what ROM you're using. Now, if you're into programming, there might be other ways of overclocking these suckers, but I'm not aware of those just yet. I'm kind of new at this. So, as I said before, multiple uses, all kinds of uses. This one I have is a ROM machine, and it's good for everything up until about the Super NES era. I am still working on getting Nintendo 64 games working. Nintendo 64 games are very laggy. Some work much better than others. Mario 64, hey, no problem at all. It's awesome. But when I try to put in basically anything else, the sound stutters and I get issues. So I'm still working on that. It's kind of a work in progress. If you want to get this to be playing Nintendo 64 era games, then you're not going to have the full experience. But anything before that is awesome, and you can use your wired Xbox remote. You can use pretty much any remote that will plug in with USB into this. I have many, and I haven't had any problems with any of them so far. You just have to make sure that you set up each button as you're going. And again, this is the system that we're doing the Kodi stuff off. There are 3 different installations you can get to run Kodi off this sucker, and that is some of the most useful things, the most practical things I've found with Raspberry Pi. Now, Eli the Computer Guy, who is an awesome YouTuber. If you haven't heard about him and you're into tech and into learning, you definitely should look him up on YouTube, Eli the Computer Guy. I believe he said that these are basically just for hobbyists, basically just for prototypes. And I gotta say, for the most part, I totally agree with him, because once you got all your things plugged in here, usually you're going from here to a breadboard to something else. And breadboards are nice, something to have on your desk, something to play with. But when it comes to actually getting out there, making it look good, and making it be in the kind of situation where you can use every day, and it's stable enough that you can bump it without unplugging and totally destroying everything, that's when it gets real practical. But at the same time, I've seen in factory positions, manufacturing positions, where they've used Raspberry Pi to hook up to the red lights of the PLCs of giant manufacturing machines. So machine stops, red light goes on. Basically, you can hook that red light up into here and make it say, oh, we have a red light. So what it would do is it would, through Wi-Fi, on the company's Wi-Fi, connect to a program called OpsView. And OpsView is something that network people will use for multiple reasons, mostly to make sure their networks are running properly, mostly to make sure that the networks everything's up, everything's going from anywhere on Earth pretty much. They use that to see if the manufacturing line was going. All it took was to see, oh, is the red light on? Yes, it's on. We're going to send a message out. Once that red light goes off, this thing stops sending the information off to OpsView. And someone got paid a lot of money to get that installed. So there's definitely potential in these, but for the most part, it's a programmer's kind of thing. And if you really know what you're doing, if you got a good imagination, you can make some money with this stuff. Raspberry Pi, a whole lot of fun. A whole lot of fun. Now, I should talk a little bit about the power supply. The power supply for these, they don't give you one out of the box. You got to get your own. And from what I have come to understand, a 1 amp power supply, a true 1 amp power supply, will be sufficient. This board can only use up to 700 milliamp, which is 0.7 amp. But a lot of chargers out there that say they're 700 or 800, it just turns out not to be true. And if you got the wrong power going to this, it will actually hurt your board more than overclocking it will, I'm to understand anyways. And you definitely don't want to do that. So when I got this thing shipped to me from the Amazon buyer, it came with a 2.5 volt, of course, 5 volt, 2.1 amp power supply, which is way more than this thing needs. But the board will take just what it needs. Too much power isn't a horrible thing in this situation. But you definitely want to make sure that for a power supply, you have 1 amp, 5 volts, 1 amp. Don't settle for anything less. Don't play any games to see if it's going to work. To see if your cheap stuff is going to work. If you're going to go to get something at the dollar store, make sure it's like brand name closeout stuff. Don't skimp on these prices, because if you do, you start getting problems, and nobody knows what the solution is, and those little things can be a real pain in the butt. Now, the next thing I got to talk about is memory. You are going to want a powerful bit of memory. Now, you'll see cards with a 1U. Right now, 1U is basically the best you can get out of one of these little drives. 1U is the best. You will see on a lot of these drives numbers with circles around them, going from 1 to 10. I haven't even seen a 1 with a circle. This is a 1 with a U. 1 with a U is the best. Now, 1 with a circle around it is pretty well the worst. I've seen 2s with circles around them, but the higher numbers you get, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the higher you get to 10 with a circle around it. And that is basically second place. But these 1 with the U, just go out and get one of these. Go out and get one of these ultras. It'll definitely help you out. I had one of the ones, the 10 with the circle in it. I was transferring information to it from the network, and it was only going at I think it was 750 kilobytes per second. And when I plugged this thing in, it was going just over a megabyte. I think it was 1.1 megabyte. So this was definitely sending a lot nicer. I ended up having some errors with that other drive that really messed me up, and I had to reformat my setup for the Raspberry Pi for video gaming that I have. Which brings me to another interesting point. The bootability and usability of these things is just really cool, really phenomenal. So you put an image onto one of these cards. If you're kind of a noob like me and you don't want to make your own source code or anything, you download an image, you format the card with an SD card compliant program you can get directly from the SD card people ultimately. And after that, you use a disk imager to put an image, a bootable image, right onto the SD card. And since these units are all the same, if I swap these cards, they will easily do the job of the other perfectly, no problem. So if I get a board that goes, I can just take the card out of the old board and put it into the new board, and away I go, yippee skippy. That is, I gotta say, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. There's bound to be a lot of practical applications for these suckers, but you gotta dig. You gotta look really pretty far into it to find what you want. But so much fun, I gotta say, so neat, so neat. Yeah. So I'll post more as I learn more, as I find out what practicalities there are to these Raspberry Pis. But so nice. You can have so much fun with them if you're patient, if you got the time. If you are a coder, the sky is the limit. All kinds of cool things you can do with these. Good stuff, YouTube. Check them out.